As I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of racialized aggression towards Mexican Americans in California, and there was the establishment of vigilante groups, right? These were not legal organizations, these are just individuals who came together and formed these groups as a way, as they say at least, to protect their communities. A lot of them claimed that there were Mexican Americans who were robbing their cattle or stealing from them or maybe even committing murders. And so these vigilante groups would go after Mexican Americans. One of these vigilante groups is the El Monte Boys in El Monte, Southern California. And so this group was responsible for the lynchings of a number of Mexican Americans. And the thing was, in a lot of cases, these people could have been innocent, right? There was no real legal proceedings that determined whether they committed any crimes at all. It's just that these groups, such as the El Monte Boys, would accuse these Mexican Americans of committing crimes. They'd hold a little trial for them, and then they would execute them. Or if they didn't kill them, they would beat them in public. And so there was a lot of violence towards Mexican Americans during this time. But you see some resistance against all of this oppression and violence towards Mexican Americans. One of these acts of resistance would be through the publication El Clamor Público, and this was a newspaper that was established by Francisco Ramirez. Ramirez would speak out against all this violence that was occurring and all this vigilante activity that was happening in California at this time. And so he established this newspaper to have a public voice to speak out for the rights of Mexican Americans. Another act of resistance towards this oppression was banditry. And an example of one of the most famous bandits during this time is Joaquin Murrieta. It was said that Joaquin Murrieta was a miner, right, who was mining for gold, and he's an example of one of the Mexican Americans who was attacked and harassed while they were mining their claims. And so it was said that Joaquin's family, members of his family were murdered, his wife was raped, and he was beaten badly himself. And then afterwards, because of this incident, he would take to banditry. Right, and so banditry involved a lot of activity in the illegal horse trade, so stealing horses and then selling them in an illegal trade. And so for a long period of time, it was said that Murrieta was involved in this trade and involved in the killing of Anglo-Americans. And so Murrieta was said to be this major bandit. There was a price put on his head and to stop his gang. And so you had a group called the California Rangers put together by the state, and they were paid by the state to put an end to the Murrieta gang. It was said that Murrieta was eventually killed by this group of California Rangers, and that he was decapitated, and his head was shown as proof so that they can get their financial reward. And the state eventually did pay for that reward. But there were some people who accused the ranchers of killing innocent Mexican Americans and claiming that they were actually Joaquin Murrieta when they actually were not. And so there's a big dispute about whether Murrieta was ever killed. Some dispute whether Murrieta was ever even really involved in all this banditry, or if it was just blamed on him to create this villain. So you have this big dispute about what role Murrieta actually played in this banditry. But one way or the other, Joaquin Murrieta became a huge folk hero for Mexican Americans because he was fighting back against Anglo-Americans. Right? And so he is an example of resistance against the oppression of Mexican Americans, right? And so even though he was, stealing horses, this is an act of resistance against Anglo-Americans who were attacking and harassing Mexican Americans during this time.